Super Bowl 56 week is here. It's quickly approaching, and well, we're going to talk about it with one of Cincinnati's finest. Hi again, everyone. I'm James Rapien of Cincinnati Bengals, talkingallbengals.com, and you may know him as Cold Baby. You may know him as the guy you saw on SportsCenter, really, since the Bengals won the AFC Championship. He's plastered all over it on ESPN. He is ESPN's Ben Baby. Ben, I appreciate you joining me. How you doing, my man?
I'm good. I'm going to tell you, it's nice and warm in my home here in Northern Kentucky. No cold at all. Just wearing a hoodie on just for fun. So, it can't be any better. Temperature's great.
For those that don't know, and we're going to dive into Super Bowl 56, but it was one of our first really, really cold practices, and Ben looked miserable. And I hate the cold too. I'll admit it now. I hate it. It's not ideal. But he looked miserable. And Ben is from Texas. So it was hilarious when I snapped a picture and suddenly the cold baby thing just went crazy. And everyone now asks him if he's cold or not. And so when the Bengals went and practiced in the bubble at the University of Cincinnati, he was like, should I go do this hit in the ice storm or should I do it from the comfort of my basement? I was like, dude, stay home. Do it in your basement. How did those go, by the way? What was that like making the rounds on SportsCenter? And I know you have before, but I'm sure this felt different ahead of Super Bowl 56.
Yeah, this was new. Having a crew come out, it was really weird having a guy set up in my basement. We had a camera out here. Like, this is where we had everything set up and we were going, and just crazy to see how things would have went. If the weather was better, we would have went outside, or if we could have even gotten inside the University of Cincinnati, but they were closed as well. But Zach Stipe and those folks were phenomenal in trying to help us even try to get in there. But no, it's the media crush and really the attention. You can definitely feel a shift in how this game is. The Bengals have said all throughout the week, this is going to be kind of like a normal week, but even they understand that it really isn't. As much as you try to make it just like a week 22 or 23 or whatever this is, when you see all the cameras, when you see all the new faces in the media press conferences, that this is a little bit different, as it should. It's the Super Bowl. And I think that's a big question that we're going to find out throughout the week is how are they adjusting to the spotlight, because it's a team that, as many people point out, I think our friend Kelsey Conway from the Inquirer actually pointed out, they haven't had any primetime games except for the one Thursday night game on week 4. Aside from that, they basically played the entire season in the 1:00 slot on Sundays, which shows you, what kind of the exposure and what kind of attention they were getting. And as they've, progressed through the postseason, I'll give them credit. They've done a very good job of staying balanced. And I think it's been pretty much the same team that we saw throughout the regular season.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I thought about that a lot. And I think the West Coast part of it benefits them because they don't have to wait around till 6:30. It's a 3:30 kick. They'll as far as that goes, it's a little later than they're used to in the one slot, but they've played 4:00 games before. They had to play 2:00 game last week in Kansas City, so that aspect shouldn't be too bad where they're like spent before the game. But I do think it is a big question. How do they handle it? Especially because when you look at the other side, and I let this go last week, but the Rams were built for this moment. The Bengals were built to get to this moment at some point, and now they're here. But the Rams are all in. They don't have a first-round pick until, 2077. All right. And I know that's a little exaggerating, but it's like 2072. So that to me is an interesting storyline. And I do think that the pressure, if you look at it that way, and not that there won't be pressure on the Bengals, but there's certainly more pressure on the Rams organization to get it done now.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely the case. When you look at how both teams are built and really the Rams, and if the Bengals don't end up winning this game, that'll show you exactly what it takes to win a Super Bowl. I mean, we see, Tampa Bay is another example of that as well. They said, we're going to go out, we're going to go get Tom Brady, we're going to go get Leonard Fournette. We're going to shore up some weaknesses that we might have. And that's what's going to propel us to the Super Bowl. And that ended up winning them a Super Bowl last year. And the Rams kind of in the similar approach, going to get Odell Beckham Jr., trading for Von Miller, getting Matthew Stafford. They said, look, we think we have the pieces to win. And really, the big piece that they built everything around, the two of them, are Cooper Kupp and Aaron Donald. And Aaron Donald has earned a lot of praise throughout the week, and I think he's got to be one of the best defensive players of all time. I mean, what he's been able to do is quite remarkable, and he's just such a unique player in the fact that he is a interior defensive lineman who is getting stats like he's an edge rusher. It just for how disruptive he can be, how well he plays both the run and the pass, and just how much havoc he wreaks. He's truly a special talent in the NFL. And I think the Rams, when you look at how they've built their team, it's all essentially built around the window of Aaron Donald. And they said, this is what we need to do, because that's, when you look at the age cycle of the players on that roster, that's really who we're looking at. Aaron Donald is probably in his final years or kind of close to the end of his prime. So, I think the Bengals, there are going to be some lessons to be learned from this, but I don't think this is a nightmare matchup. It's not a great matchup, but it's not a nightmare matchup. And Cincinnati's been able to overcome some bad looks throughout the postseason, especially against some very good fronts, and come away with some W's. So I think that's an encouraging sign if you're looking for one, if you're a Cincinnati fan.
Make sure you check out Ben Baby at ESPN.com. Has a cool feature coming out on Joe Burrow this week. Also follow him on Twitter at Ben_baby. Yeah, let's talk about that matchup, because I think most Bengals fans during the NFC title game were like, all right, the 49ers don't have Aaron Donald and the Rams do. Yeah, the 49ers have Bosa. Well, the Rams have Von Miller and all these other edge rushers. So I would much rather face, if you're a Bengals fan, you were thinking the 49ers, not the Rams. But it is the Rams, and it's been a week. We've had a week to digest it. And I agree with you. It's not an ideal matchup for a few reasons. The first one being Aaron Donald against that interior and all of those twists and stunts. And it isn't exactly like Tennessee, but they're certainly going to try to do some of the same things that Tennessee did. And they're probably salivating at the idea of going against the interior of the Bengals offensive line. How do you see that playing out? Is it as simple as, all right, Joe Burrow, grab the Harry Potter wand and make some more magic in Super Bowl 56? Or is it, are they able to contain those guys in the trenches?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be able to be quite honest. And I know that the Cincinnati offensive line is not really thrilled about people like me saying that. But when you see the track record, I think that's just the case. I mean, the Rams were number one in the NFL in pass rush win rate, according to NFL Next Gen and our ESPN metrics, which means that they got after quarterbacks and they beat opposing offensive linemen more than anybody in the NFL as a whole. Meanwhile, the Bengals were next to last. And it's the Bengals offensive line that was in that kind of shape last year as well in 2020. And so I think when you look at the game plan, for me, when you see how Zach Taylor approached the first Kansas City game and how Zach Taylor approached the second Kansas City game, it tells us volumes about where he feels about in this offensive line and how he wants to attack offensively. In that first game, they came out. I wondered if they were going to be a little bit hesitant against a really good front, that had Chris Jones, Frank Clark. They have some guys in that front seven, the Kansas City does. And they still came out in empty personnel, 11 personnel, and said, Joe Burrow, you're going to go out and you're going to sling it, and you're going to try to win this game through the air. The second time they played Kansas City, it was a much different strategy. And I was thinking, well, what happened between those two games? 9 sacks against Tennessee happened between those two games. And we saw that Zach Taylor was very conservative. He ran on first downs a lot, ran on second downs a lot, looked for play action deep balls. One of them, Joe Burrow tried one of those in the second half, got intercepted when he tried to squeeze the ball into Jamar Chase. But if you're the Bengals and you're Zach Taylor, you're not really too upset about that interception, because ideally that's what you were playing for the entire game. You were trying to make those deep shots. And when you look at the blueprint of how the Bengals have been successful in the postseason, it has actually been the opposite for the most part of when they were really humming in the regular season. Those wins against Baltimore, when they beat Kansas City, even games against Green Bay. If the Bengals are going to win this game, the number one factor has to be winning the turnover margin. And Zach Taylor said that throughout the season, saying that's the thing we have to do. And I think I understand now why he's been so vocal about saying that. And because whenever the Bengals have been able to take the ball away and keep other offenses at bay, the Bengals have been put in favorable positions because their offense really just isn't clicking. No matter how you look at it, the offense has been ineffective in the postseason. When you look at the lack of touchdowns that they've scored, were it not for Evan McPherson, a.k.a. your guy Monty Mack, a.k.a. Shooter McPherson, if it weren't for him and those turnovers, the Bengals aren't playing in the Super Bowl. And the Bengals have done a really good job. I think the turnover rate is just about 20% or 22%, according to according to ESPN stats and information. And that's got to be key because of how things have looked so far.
Yeah, I know. It's a really good point, because last week specifically, I thought that the Bengals are going to have to get to 40, and I was hammering, got to get to 40, got to get to 40, got to get to 40. And I just don't know if this offense can do that in this playoff invite, just the way it is in the playoffs. It's more physical. The officials let you get by with more. The Chiefs were certainly grabby. And so I look at this matchup. If you're Zach Taylor, and I do want to talk about the defense, but if you're Zach Taylor, do you go empty? Do you, for the first time in the playoffs, go back to what you did when you were going to clinch the AFC North and you say, look, Burrow's been taking care of the ball outside of last week. We're going to do what and get what got us here to a degree, because it did. I mean, the last 6 weeks of the regular season, Burrow went to another level, and he still is. But like you mentioned, even last week, everyone talks about Tennessee last week, 42% pressure rate, 1 sack. I mean, that's all Burrow. That's not the offensive line. They were bad against the Chiefs too. What do you do if you're Zach Taylor?
I think you do the exact same thing you did against the first time against Kansas City. I'll tell you why.
You open it
because
up.
You're not. This isn't, like you said, Los Angeles is all in. The Bengals necessarily aren't all in. If anything, they're at the beginning of their window. And I think that you maybe have to play with the future in mind as well, in that you do not want to risk Joe Burrow taking too many hits, too much pressure, and you're off. If you feel like the game is going to get out of hand early and you don't have the offensive line that's going to keep up, then you do have to figure out, okay, we can't get Burrow killed back there. And I think that's been also in the back of Zach Taylor's mind throughout this season as well, in the way that they went out and played Kansas City. And here's the thing. I think your defense is good enough. And I think that your special teams are good enough that you can play that way, and you can say, you know what, our defense has kind of carried us throughout the year. We're going to go ahead and do that. And we've seen Zach Taylor have a lot of confidence in his defense. I mean, going back to that Minnesota game, everybody gave Zach Taylor grief for going forward on 4th and 1 on his own 30. But the reason he did that, because his defense had Minnesota in check all game. And he said, it's nothing to us to go put them back out there because they're that good. And I think that there has been that confidence. I mean, we talked about how good the defense was even back in the preseason. And we were like, oh, man, is this offense really going to be that bad this year? And everyone's like, no. Our defense is that good. Like, y'all watch and see, they're going to be really good. And sure enough, Lou Anarumo and that group has done a good job. And I know we've spent a lot of time talking about the defense here. But, I think going back to your question, I would imagine that Zach Taylor maybe tries to see what he can do early, see exactly how that offensive line is going to hold up. And I think that first play call, that first script, those first 15 plays are going to tell us a lot about how they're going to have to adjust and what they're going to need to do moving forward.
Yeah, there's only one thing that you said there that I was like, It's the Super Bowl, Ben. Oh. I'm not worried about – I want to protect Burrow so he can distribute the ball. But you have to go all in to win this game. So whatever the path is, because they might not get here again. I think the roster, and I don't think this is a take, the roster on paper is going to probably be more talented next year. Going to have a whole nother draft. You're going to probably spend some money in free agency for the 3rd straight year. Burrow's another year removed from the ACL. Jamar Chase is closer to his prime, even though he's playing like a game changer already. I could certainly see that path where they're more talented next year, but they might not get here. They might not get here the year after that or the year after that. And so if they have to go empty and Burrow has to take, and people might hate me for this, 27 hits in the Super Bowl, if it gets you the Lombardi, and that probably isn't the path to getting it, by the way. I admit that.
It might be.
And that's it. If it gets that, then it's worth it. And right. You know what? Like, Burrow will say, all right, I'll take the hits. Like so that's the balance, right? And right. That's the interesting part on offense. But yeah, let's dive into the defense a bit more, because to me, and I've said this a ton, it's the biggest surprise of the season. It's not that Burrow's good or Chase is good or, Joe Mixon's a Pro Bowl or anything like that. It's that this defense has not only won them games, won them playoff games. And if I had to paint an outlook or a likely path to victory, it might be that Tennessee kind of blueprint where you're scoring, but you're holding the Rams in check. And yeah, you might have to punt a bunch. But if you can keep the Rams at bay with this defense, you're okay doing that. And I think they're going to be comfortable. And it's going to begin and end with Cooper Kupp. But I think they're built to take away that deep ball. And they're not going to be undisciplined like Tampa Bay was in the divisional round and letting Kupp beat them deep in crucial moments. So how do you think this defense is going to fare against the Rams?
I think they're going to play pretty well. I think that you've got to be really encouraged. And going back just real quick to wrap up that point, if the Bengals do end up dropping back a ton, like I said, I will not fault them at all, because like you said, you've got to do what it takes to win. So I think that you can see an argument from both sides. You can say we're going to play with the future in mind, or we might not get here. And whatever Zach Taylor decides to do, I don't think you can fault him either way. I think both sides are pretty easy to defend. Going back to this defense, when you look at it, the Bengals have actually done a pretty good job of not getting really, really beat on big plays. There's been a couple plays throughout the year. There was the Donovan People-Jones touchdown against Cleveland in Week 9. I think you had, even though it ended up being an incompletion, Tyreek Hill was able to get past, the defense in that first game against Kansas City. But I believe it was Von Bell who had that tremendous play to break that up and avoid incompletion, avoided a completion. But I think that we've seen so much progress out of this defense, and the synergy, the communication, and really Louis Anarumo, it sounds so cheesy, but he said, it's kind of like a family on our side of the ball. And I love that Jesse Bates, when we talked to him a couple weeks ago, he said, sometimes with Coach Lou, I'll come in there and I'm like, I'm not talking to you today because Lou kind of got me heated yesterday. So I don't know if I can be around him today. But you don't say stuff like that if you don't feel like you're in a really good place. And if there isn't a good understanding of, you know what, you kind of tweaked me a little bit yesterday, I still like you, but I need my space from you. I mean, that's something that you've got to have a really good relationship to be able to do that. And I think that they've done a good job of being open and honest. And the coaching staff has done over the last couple of years, maybe done a good job of maybe growing and fostering those relationships. And when I asked Zach Taylor about the biggest difference between 2019 and 2021, in our weird Zoom settings, it's tough to get a really good answer. But I felt that it was telling that he said that those relationships were huge and that bond and that chemistry was a big factor in why they've been so successful. And I think that specifically on the defensive side of the ball, when you look at the guys they brought in, everybody almost has had something to prove the entire year. Somebody said they weren't able to do this, that, or the other. And all of those guys collectively have played with that chip on their shoulder. And when you look at it, they don't have a lot of superstars to a degree, but they have a lot of really, really, really good players at every level of the defense. I think DJ Reader's been an absolute rock. Trey Hendrickson, I will say, probably a star and should be considered a star given how well he's played. The linebackers have done a good job. And then the secondary, I think, has actually been quite strong. And that's something maybe we weren't expecting in the season. I think Jesse Bates is playing at that all-pro caliber that we thought he would at the beginning of the season. Von Bell has definitely stepped up in pass coverage. And the corners have been good in Chidobe Awuzie and Eli Apple. So I think that defense as a whole has been really strong. And you've got to give Louis Anarumo a ton of credit. This was a guy who a lot of fans had under fire after his first 2 seasons. A lot of people wondered, should this guy come back for year 3? A lot of people were saying the same thing about Zach Taylor as well. And if Zach parted ways with Lou, I don't think anybody would have blinked an eye. But to his credit, they retained the core of that coaching staff, and Anarumo has done a fantastic job. I mean, the guy shut down Patrick Mahomes not once, but twice, and kept him without a touchdown the second half in 2 games. All of that's been really impressive.
Yeah, and if he can force a couple turnovers, I really do. I think it might come down to that, and it's such a cliche, right? Trenches and turnovers. I think that's the deciding factor in Super Bowl 56, because if the Bengals can give just make Aaron Donald stub his toe so he doesn't force a strip fumble or force Burrow to throw it earlier than he wants to. And then Matt Stafford's going to throw it up, man. It's in his blood to throw it up. It just is. He did it against the 49ers in the NFC title game. It was a lollipop that you would see at Great American Ballpark to center field, shallow center, should have been caught, wasn't caught. So the Bengals have to take advantage of that, and I agree with you. I think Jesse Bates certainly capable of doing that. Ben, I've taken up a lot of your time, a ton of your time. You have to get back to doing Sports Center hits and staying warm and writing for ESPN.com. So I look forward to your coverage this week. I'm excited to party with you in LA. I'll be very honest, so that'll be exciting as well. So safe travels, and I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good, James. Thanks for having me.